The distress signal came from Prime on a quiet morning. It traveled across the stars and reached the Galactic Coalition's great station called the Eternal Accord. Within hours, every important species in the known galaxy had heard the news. The Velar were going to die. The Velar were a peaceful people. They had lived on their beautiful water world for millions of years. Their skin was smooth and blue-green like the color of their shallow seas. They had been members of the Coalition for 12,000 years, longer than most species could remember. They had never started a war. They had never harmed anyone, and now their sun was killing them. The scientists called it stellar destabilization. The Velar star, a yellow sun much like Earth's, had begun to change. It was growing. It was getting hotter. Within 18 standard months, it would expand and swallow everything close to it. Prime would burn. 9 billion Velar would die. Ambassador Ra stood before the Emergency Council and delivered the news herself. She was old for her kind, nearly 200 years, and she had served her people her entire life. Now she had to tell the galaxy that her people were doomed. "We have calculated the numbers," she said. Her voice was calm and steady, though inside she felt like screaming. "The Coalition has many ships, but not enough. To evacuate 9 billion people would require every transport vessel in Coalition space running without rest for 6 years. We have 18 months. The council chamber was silent. Representatives from 17 elder races sat in their assigned places. The crystalline Eth glowed softly in their section, their bodies made of living crystal that pulsed with emotion. The collective clicked their mandibles in distress. The vast beings who lived in gas giant planets sent their holographic representatives to speak for them. They all knew what Ra was saying. Most of her people would die. "We propose a selective evacuation," Ra continued. "The young, the scientists, those who carry our culture and our knowledge. Perhaps 200 million can be saved. Perhaps 300 million if we push hard. The rest of us will stay. We will die with our world." No one argued with her. The mathematics were clear. The Eth delegate, a being of pure crystal who had lived for 3,000 years, expressed what everyone felt. It was a tragedy. It was unavoidable. The universe was cruel, and sometimes entire species simply ended. The council prepared to vote on evacuation quotas. Which species would give up their ships? How would the refugees be distributed? Where would the surviving Velar live? Then a human stood up. The humans sat in the back of the chamber. They were new to the Coalition, members for barely 2 centuries. By galactic standards, they were children. Their technology was primitive compared to the elder races. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were weak. They had only left their home planet a few hundred years ago, while other species had sailed between the stars for millions of years. Most of the elder races thought of humans as clever animals, amusing, sometimes useful, but certainly not important. Admiral Wei walked to the speaking platform. She was a small woman with gray hair and dark eyes that had seen many things. She had commanded human fleets in 3 conflicts. She had negotiated treaties with hostile species. She was not afraid of this room full of ancient beings. "Leave it to us," she said. The chamber went silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. The Eth delegate pulsed with what the translator called gentle condescension. The collective made sounds that meant something like confused pity. This hologram flickered as they discussed among themselves. "Admiral," the Eth delegate said, "we appreciate your species' desire to help. It is admirable, but you do not understand the scale of this problem. Your entire fleet could not evacuate 1% of the Velar population." Admiral nodded. "You're probably right." "Then what do you propose?" "I propose that you continue your evacuation preparations. Save as many as you can with your methods. Give us 18 months. Let us try something different." "What will you try?" Admiral smiled. It was not a happy smile. "We haven't figured that out yet, but we will." The elder races did not know what to say. This was not how galactic civilization worked. Problems were analyzed. Solutions were calculated. If the mathematics said something was impossible, then it was impossible. You did not simply declare that you would find a way. But the humans had always been strange. The council agreed to let the humans try, mostly because they saw no harm in it. The humans would fail, of course, but perhaps they would learn something from the failure. Perhaps it would teach them humility. Within hours, every human ship in Coalition space began moving. They did not go toward Prime. They went somewhere else entirely, to a location that no one else knew. Ambassador Ra watched the human delegation leave. Admiral stopped at the door and looked back at her. "Ambassador," the human said, "how many children are on Prime?" Ra blinked. Perhaps 2 billion under the age of maturity. Why?" "Just curious." Admiral's face was unreadable. "We have a saying on Earth. Where I come from, we say that giving up is not an option. It's not something we do." "That is a strange saying. Sometimes giving up is the only option." "Maybe for other species." Admiral turned to leave. "Not for us. We'll be in touch, Ambassador." She left. The door closed behind her. Ra stood alone in the corridor and felt something she could not name. The humans were too young to understand what they were attempting. They did not have the ships, the resources, or the technology. They would fail. Everyone knew they would fail. But something about the way Admiral had spoken made Ra feel strange. It was not hope exactly. Hope was foolish in this situation. It was something else, something she had not felt in a long time. She returned to her quarters and began writing letters to her family on Prime. She told them she loved them. She told them she was sorry. She told them to be brave. But she did not tell them to give up, not yet. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, human ships were gathering, and across human space, a message was spreading faster than light itself. It was simple. It was direct. It was very human. The message said, "Prime, 18 months, everyone." No one knew what it meant yet, but soon the entire galaxy would find out. The message traveled across human space like fire through dry grass. It reached Earth first, then Mars, then the colonies on and Tau and all the other worlds where humans had built their homes. Within 1 week, every human in the galaxy knew about Prime. And they began to move. On Mars, the great shipyards that had been quiet for decades roared back to life. Workers who had retired years ago came back. Young people who had never built a ship before showed up and asked to learn. The factories ran day and night, their lights visible from Earth as tiny bright spots on the red planet's surface. On Earth, private citizens offered their ships. Luxury yachts designed for pleasure trips between Earth and Luna were stripped of their fancy furniture and expensive decorations. The owners did not ask for payment. They simply handed over the keys and said, "Use it." From the colony on B, the first-generation ships launched. These were ancient vessels, the same ships that had carried humanity's first colonists to other stars 100 years ago. They had been kept in museums and maintained by historical societies. Now they flew again, their old engines burning bright against the darkness. The Galactic Coalition watched this activity with mild interest. The elder races had seen young species mobilize before. It was a common response to tragedy. The enthusiasm was touching, they said. It would not be enough, they said, but at least the humans were trying. Then the humans did something unexpected. 3 star systems away from Prime, there was a barren moon. It had no atmosphere, no life, nothing of value. The humans arrived there with a fleet of strange machines. They called these machines devices because they could make almost anything from raw materials. The machines began eating the moon. They broke down the rock and metal and converted it into new machines. Those new machines made more machines. Within 2 weeks, the moon was covered with factories. Within a month, half the moon was gone. Within 2 months, the moon had vanished completely. In its place was something that made the coalition ambassadors fall silent. It was a shipyard, but it was not like any shipyard the galaxy had ever seen. It was enormous, stretching across space where the moon had been, and it was building ships at a rate that should have been impossible. The coalition sent observers. Delegate of the collective was one of them. He was an insect-like being with compound eyes and 4 arms, and he had lived for 90 years. He thought he understood the universe. Then he visited the human shipyard. The humans were everywhere. They swarmed over the construction platforms like insects themselves, welding and cutting and assembling. They worked in shifts that lasted 16 hours, then 20 hours, then they stopped tracking hours entirely. They ate at their stations. They slept in corners when their bodies gave out. Then they woke up and went back to work. Watched a human woman working on an engine assembly. Her hands were burned and her eyes were red from lack of sleep. She had been working for 30 hours straight. "This is not sustainable," told her. "Your biological systems will fail at this pace. You will die." The woman looked at him with eyes that burned with something he could not understand. "Then I'll die tired," she said. "Now either help or get out of my way. I've got 9 billion people to save." Stepped out of her way. The ships the humans built were not beautiful. The elder races created vessels that were works of art, elegant and efficient, designed to last for centuries. The human ships were ugly. They were angular and rough, held together by welding and structural adhesive. Coalition engineers examined the designs and declared them dangerous. The ships sacrificed safety for speed. They sacrificed elegance for cargo capacity. They were flying coffins. The humans agreed with this assessment. They built them anyway. Admiral visited the shipyard at the end of the second month. She walked through the construction bays and watched her people work. Many of them did not even look up when she passed. They were too focused on their tasks. She found the chief engineer, a man named who had not slept in 3 days. His hands shook when he pointed at the production numbers. "We're ahead of schedule," he said. "We've built 400 ships. We'll have 1,000 by month 4, 2,000 by month 5. If nothing breaks, if we keep this pace, we might have 10,000 by month 12. "And your people?" Admiral asked. Was quiet for a moment. "We've had accidents, 3 deaths so far, more injuries than I can count. People are burning out, breaking down, but no one wants to stop. They know what's at stake." Admiral nodded. She had known this would happen. She had known the cost would be high. But when she thought about 9 billion Velar waiting on a dying world, the cost seemed small. "Keep building," she said. "Whatever you need you'll get, I'll make sure of it." Back on Earth and Mars and all the human worlds, the economy was collapsing. Factories that made consumer goods had switched to making ship parts. Farms were understaffed because workers had left to join the construction effort. Food was rationed. Luxuries disappeared. The human standard of living dropped by 40% in 3 months. No one complained. When a news reporter asked a factory worker why she was willing to give up so much for strangers she had never met, the woman shrugged. "They're people," she said. "They're scared and they're going to die if we don't help. What else are we supposed to do? Watch." The reporter had no answer for that. Month 3 ended. The human fleet had grown to 800 ships. The coalition's official evacuation had saved 12 million Velar. The humans had not saved anyone yet. They were still building, still preparing, still refusing to accept that their task was impossible. Ambassador Ross sent a message to Admiral. "My people are losing hope," she wrote. "Tell me that your plan will work. Tell me that this is not all for nothing." Admiral's reply was short. "We don't know if it will work. We've never tried anything like this before, but we're not going to stop. We're not going to give up. That's not who we are." Ra read the message and did not know whether to laugh or cry. The humans were insane. Their plan had no guarantee of success. They were destroying their economy and killing their workers for a chance, just a chance, that they might save a species they had only known for 200 years. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She sent a reply to Admiral. It contained only 2 words, "Thank you." Then she went to her people and told them to hold on. Help was coming. The humans had promised. And humans, she was learning, did not break their promises. Month 6 arrived, and the sky above Prime began to change. The sun that had warmed the Velar for millions of years now looked wrong. It was larger than before. Its color had shifted from warm yellow to angry orange. The scientists said it would continue to grow. They said the end was coming. But something else was coming too. The first human ships appeared without warning. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel in groups of 50, then 100, then more than anyone could count. Within one day, the space around Prime was filled with vessels. They were ugly ships, rough and angular, nothing like the elegant craft of the elder races. But they were there. Thousands of them. Ambassador Ra stood at her office window and watched them arrive. Tears ran down her face. The humans had built 12,000 ships in 6 months. The coalition's official evacuation had saved 40 million Velar. At their current rate, they might save 300 million before the star expanded. The humans had come to save everyone. Admiral contacted Ra from her command ship, the Determined. She looked exhausted. Her hair had gone completely gray. Dark circles surrounded her eyes, but she was smiling. "We're ready to begin operations," she said. "I need you to organize your people. We're going to take as many as we can fit on each ship. Forget comfort. Forget personal belongings. We're packing them in tight." "How tight?" Ra asked. "Standing room only if we have to. We'll sort out the details after everyone's alive." The evacuation began that same day. Human ships descended through the Velar atmosphere in waves. They landed on every flat surface they could find. Their cargo bays opened, and human crews rushed out to guide the Velar aboard. The Velar had been preparing for months. They had organized themselves into groups. They had said goodbye to their homes, their possessions, everything they could not carry. When the human ships arrived, they were ready. The first ship to launch was called the First of Many. It carried 4,000 Velar packed into a space designed for 2,000. The conditions were uncomfortable. The air was thin, but the passengers were alive and they were leaving. More ships followed. The humans did not wait for optimal launch times. They did not calculate efficient routes. They burned fuel recklessly, pushing their engines past safe limits. Ships that should have taken weeks to reach the transit point made the journey in days. Coalition observers watched in amazement and horror. "They're going to destroy their ships," said the ETH delegate. "They're burning out their engines. Those vessels will never fly again." Admiral's response was simple: "Then we'll build more." The human shipyards had not stopped. Even as the evacuation fleet worked around Prime, new ships were being constructed. The moon that had been consumed was just the beginning. The humans had found other moons, other asteroids, other sources of raw material. Their machines ate everything and turned it into ships. By the end of month 6, 500 million Velar had been evacuated. The coalition had saved another 50 million through their official efforts. The numbers were adding up. Hope was growing. But hope came with a price. The human crews were breaking down. They had been working without proper rest for months. The ships they flew were poorly built, rushed into service before they were truly ready. Problems appeared. Engines failed. Life support systems malfunctioned. The crews fixed what they could and kept flying. On month 7, a ship called the Never Surrender lost engine power during atmospheric exit. The pilot tried to restart the engines. He tried 3 times. On the 4th attempt, the ship crashed into the ocean below. 600 Velar and 12 human crew members died. The humans held a brief memorial service, 30 seconds of silence. Then they launched the next ship. Ambassador Ra visited the human staging area in month 8. She wanted to understand these strange beings who were killing themselves to save her people. She found a young pilot sitting alone in a hangar, staring at nothing. His name was James. He was 23 years old. He had flown 18 missions in the past 2 months. His hands would not stop shaking. "Why do you do this?" Ra asked him. "Your ships are dangerous, your crews are dying, you could stop. No one would blame you." James looked at her with eyes that had seen too much death. "Ma'am, I've got 2 billion of your people still waiting down there. Kids mostly, families, people who never done anything wrong in their entire lives. And there's a giant ball of fire coming to kill them all. But the cost—" "I don't care about the cost." James's voice cracked. "I care about those kids. I care about those families. Every time I land my ship and watch them walk out alive knowing they're going to make it, that's worth everything. That's worth my life if it comes to that." Ra did not know what to say. She had lived for 200 years. She had met thousands of beings from hundreds of species. She had never met anyone like this young human pilot who was willing to die for strangers. "You are remarkable," she said finally. James laughed. It was a tired sound. "No, ma'am, I'm just human. This is what we do." Month 9 ended. The evacuation had reached 4 billion. Half of the Velar population was safe. The other half waited on a world that grew hotter every day. The human fleet was falling apart. Ships that had been built in weeks were failing after months of hard use. Crews that had pushed themselves past all limits were collapsing. The death toll rose, 50 human crew members, then 100, then more. But the ships kept coming, the pilots kept flying, the Velar kept boarding. Admiral received a message from Earth. The human government was concerned. The economy was suffering. The death toll was rising. Some politicians were saying it was time to stop, to accept that they had done enough, to let the rest of the Velar die with dignity. Admiral's reply was short. "We stop when everyone's safe, not before." She sent the message and returned to her command screen. There were still 5 billion Velar on that dying world. There was still work to do. She was tired. Her body ached. Her mind was foggy from lack of sleep. But she thought about those 5 billion people, about the children and families and elders waiting for rescue, and she felt strength return to her bones. They would save them all, every single one. Or they would die trying. Month 14 brought fire to Prime. The sun filled half the sky now, a swollen red monster that seemed to pulse with hunger. The surface temperature had risen 30 degrees. Lakes and rivers were drying up. The shallow seas that had covered most of the planet were beginning to boil. Steam rose from the waters and filled the air with heat. The Velar could no longer live in their beautiful coastal cities. They had retreated to climate-controlled domes in the highlands, artificial islands of cool air in a world turning to flame. 7 billion of them had been evacuated. 2 billion remained. The human fleet was dying. Of the 12,000 ships that had been built, only 5,000 were still flying. The others had broken down, crashed, or been pushed so hard that their engines simply stopped working. Human engineers worked around the clock to repair what they could, but they were fighting a losing battle. The ships had been built for speed, not durability. They were falling apart. The human crews were falling apart too. Captain Maria Santos had been flying evacuation missions for 11 months. She had saved more than 200,000 Velar. She had watched 3 of her crew members die when a cargo bay door failed during landing. She had not slept more than 4 hours at a time since the operation began. On month 14, day 3, her hands started shaking so badly that she could not hold the flight controls. The ship's doctor, a young woman named who was herself running on stimulants and determination, examined her. "You need to rest," doctor said. "Your nervous system is failing. If you keep flying, you'll crash." "How many people are still down there?" Captain Santos asked. "About 2 billion. "Then I'll keep flying." Doctor injected her with something that stopped the shaking. It was not a cure. It was a temporary fix that would cause more damage in the long run, but the long run did not matter. Only the next mission mattered. Captain Santos flew 6 more missions that day. She collapsed on the 7th. Her first officer took over without a word. The disasters were mounting. The Crazy Horse went down in the northern wetlands during a dust storm. 4,000 Velar and 12 humans died. The Persistence and the Stubborn Mule collided during orbital maneuvers. 900 dead. A batch of ships from the secondary shipyard had faulty life support systems. The flaw was not discovered until the Hope Springs Eternal arrived at its destination with 6,000 suffocated passengers. Human families across the galaxy received notifications. Your son is dead. Your daughter is dead. Your husband, wife, parent, child is dead. They died saving strangers. They died heroes. The families wept, and then they sent more volunteers. Admiral collapsed in month 14. The doctors said her heart was failing. The stress, the lack of sleep, the constant pressure had broken something inside her. They confined her to the medical bay and told her she could not leave. She called her second-in-command, a man named Admiral, to her bedside. "Don't stop," she said. Her voice was weak, but her eyes still burned with determination. "Whatever happens, don't stop. We're so close." "The fleet is falling apart," said. "The crews are breaking down. We've lost 9,000 ships. We've lost 2,000 people. Some of the captains are saying we should pull back, consolidate, save our strength, and let the remaining Velar die." Was silent. "Don't stop," Admiral repeated. "That's an order. My last order if it has to be. We finish this." Nodded. He left the medical bay and returned to the command center. He looked at the tactical display. 2 billion Velar still on the planet. 4,000 human ships still flying. 4 months until the star consumed everything. He opened a channel to the fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral. Admiral is temporarily out of commission. I am assuming command. New orders, we continue operations at maximum capacity. No rest rotations. No maintenance delays. We fly until we can't fly anymore. Every single Velar on that planet is coming home with us. Every single one. Out." The fleet responded. Tired voices, broken voices, voices that should have been silenced by exhaustion and despair. They all said the same thing, acknowledged. The Galactic Coalition watched the humans destroy themselves. The ETH delegates sent a message to the human government. "Your people are dying. Your economy is collapsing. You have already saved more lives than anyone thought possible. It is acceptable to stop. No one will think less of you." The human response came from a teenager on Earth. He was 16 years old, and his father was a pilot in the evacuation fleet. His message was broadcast across the galaxy. "You don't understand us," he said. "You think we're doing this because we want glory or recognition. We're not. We're doing this because there are people who need help and we can help them. It's that simple. As long as there's one person left on that planet, we're going to keep trying to save them. That's just who we are." Month 15. 7.5 billion Velar evacuated. 1.5 billion remaining. Human ships lost, 9,000. Human lives lost, 2,200. Month 16. 8.2 billion Velar evacuated. 800 million remaining. The surface of Prime was on fire. The last evacuation zones were shrinking as the heat became unbearable. And then something unexpected happened. The ETH sent their crystal ships. They arrived without announcement, elegant vessels that shimmered with internal light. Behind them came the collective's hive transports, massive organic ships that could carry millions. Then the somehow converted their atmospheric processors into passenger vessels. The elder races had watched the humans sacrifice everything. They had calculated the odds and declared the mission impossible. They had been wrong. The humans had shown them a different way. Now they joined the fight. The combined fleet swept down on Prime like a wave of salvation. Human ships flew alongside ETH crystals and hive transports. Crews that had never spoken to each other worked together to fill every available space with refugees. Admiral wept when he saw the reinforcements arrive. Admiral, watching from her medical bed, smiled for the first time in months. "Told you," she whispered, "leave it to us." The final push had begun. 800 million Velar waited for rescue. The star was growing larger every hour. The race against time was reaching its climax. But now humanity was not running that race alone. Month 17 brought the end of the world. Prime was burning. The beautiful oceans that had covered most of the planet were gone, boiled away into clouds of steam that filled the sky. The great cities that had stood for 10,000 years had melted into rivers of liquid stone. The forests, the meadows, the gentle hills where Velar children had played for generations were nothing but ash. The sun filled the entire sky now, a wall of red fire that crept closer every hour. The scientists said the final expansion would happen in days. When it did, nothing within 3 astronomical units would survive. 800 million Velar waited in the last evacuation zones. These were artificial domes built in the highest mountains, the only places where the temperature was still survivable. The domes were failing. Their power systems were overloaded. Their cooling units were breaking down one by one. Inside those domes, families huddled together. Parents held their children. Elders told stories about the old days when their world was beautiful and safe. They watched the sky and prayed for rescue. Rescue came. The combined fleet fell upon Prime like a storm of hope. Human ships, eth crystals, hive transports, processors, thousands of vessels descended through the burning atmosphere. They landed on any flat surface they could find. They opened their doors and called for passengers. The Velar ran. They carried their children, their elderly, their sick. They left behind everything they had ever known. They climbed into the waiting ships and did not look back. The human ship One More Trip was old. Its captain, Sarah Mitchell, was 67 years old. She had retired from freight hauling 15 years ago. When she heard about the evacuation, she came out of retirement because she had a ship and the Velar needed ships. She had flown 42 missions. Her engines were failing. Her hull was cracked. Her crew of 3 had shrunk to just herself when the others collapsed from exhaustion. She should have stopped flying weeks ago. She flew anyway. The One More Trip landed at the last evacuation dome on the northern continent. The dome's shields were failing. The temperature inside had risen to dangerous levels. 4,000 Velar waited there, most of them children from an orphanage that had been moved from the lowlands. Sarah opened her cargo bay and started loading passengers. She fit 2,000 in the space designed for 500. Then she fit another 1,000 in the corridors. Then she fit another 1,000 anywhere else she could find. 4,000 Velar, one old ship, one old pilot. The dome's shields failed as the One More Trip launched. Sarah saw the building melt behind her through her rear cameras. If she had been 30 seconds slower, everyone would have died. She pushed her engines to maximum power. They screamed in protest. Warning lights flashed across her control panel. The ship shook so hard she could barely keep her hands on the controls. "Come on," she whispered to her ship. "One more trip, that's all I'm asking. One more trip." The engines failed halfway to orbit. Sarah felt the ship lurch as the main drive cut out. She tried to restart it. Nothing. She tried again. Nothing. She was falling and she had 4,000 children in her cargo bay. Then something grabbed her ship. It was the Gentle Current, a Velar medical vessel. It had seen the One More Trip struggling and moved to intercept. Its tractor beams locked onto the failing human ship and began towing it toward the transit point. Sarah Mitchell sat back in her chair and laughed. Tears ran down her face. She had done it. They had all done it. The One More Trip was the last ship to leave Prime. It broke atmosphere 12 minutes before the star consumed everything. Behind it, A world that had been home to a civilization for millions of years ceased to exist. But its people lived. Final count, 9 billion Velar evacuated, 0 left behind. Human casualties, 2,417 dead. Human ships lost, 9,106. Coalition ships lost, 12. The cost had been enormous. The human economy was in ruins. Thousands of families had lost loved ones. The fleet that had taken generations to build was mostly gone. But 9 billion people were alive because of them. The Galactic Coalition held an emergency session to honor the humans. The Great Chamber on Eternal Accord was filled with representatives from every species in known space. They had come to witness something unprecedented. Admiral was there, pushed in a wheelchair by Admiral. She was weak. The doctors said she might never fully recover, but she was alive and she was smiling. The ETH delegate spoke first. For the first time in recorded history, a ETH dimmed their crystalline form, their deepest gesture of respect. "We calculated the odds," the delegate said. "We declared the evacuation impossible. We were wrong. The humans showed us that impossible is just a word. It is not a limit." The collective spoke next. Their representatives' mandibles clicked with emotion. The humans did not ask for payment. They did not ask for recognition. They gave everything they had for strangers they had never met. "We do not have words for what they have done. We only have gratitude." Then the coalition made an announcement. The humans were being offered a seat on the Elder Council. It was the highest honor in galactic civilization, reserved for species that had proven themselves worthy over thousands of years. The humans had proven themselves in 18 months. Admiral asked to speak. She was helped to the podium by Admiral. She stood there, small and frail, surrounded by beings who had lived for thousands of years, who had built civilizations spanning star systems, who had considered her species primitive just 18 months ago. "We're not special," she said. Her voice was quiet, but every being in the chamber heard her. "We're not braver or stronger or smarter than any of you. We're just stubborn." She paused to catch her breath. When someone tells us something is impossible, some part of us hears it as a challenge. When someone is suffering and we can help, we don't calculate the odds. We don't ask if it's worth the cost. We just help, because that's who we are. She looked around the chamber, at the ancient beings who watched her with something like wonder. "You asked why we did this, why we sacrificed so much for strangers. The answer is simple. What kind of people would we be if we hadn't tried?" The chamber was silent. Then Ambassador Ra rose from her seat and approached the podium. She bowed to Admiral, a gesture of deepest respect among her people. "You gave us our future," Ra said. "You gave us our children. You gave us the chance to live and grow and become something new. We will never forget. For as long as the Velar exist, we will remember what the humans did for us." The Velar had no now, but they had their lives. They scattered across coalition space, welcomed everywhere they went, and they carried a story with them. The story of the impossible fleet. The story of a species that refused to accept defeat. The story of 9 billion souls saved because one small, young, stubborn species looked at the mathematics of despair and said 4 simple words: "Leave it to us," and then worked a miracle.